Hey, you just had a YouTube search on variables in Java or data types in Java and you found this video. It seems that you probably is a beginner or you know a little bit of coding but you're struggling with writing code because you're struggling with basics. So as you know, to learn a language you need to know about the alphabets of it. Just like that, to know a programming language you need to have the basics of that language. And when we talk about basics, it starts from variables and data types. So in this lecture, I'm going to cover variables and data types in Java. Hi, my name is Abhilash and thanks for tuning to my channel, Selenium Express.
Now let's quickly see the content of this tutorial. First, I'll give you a quick introduction to variables and data types in Java. Then I'll take you to my whiteboard animation and I'll walk you through each and individual data types of Java right from the scratch. In between, I'll cover a lot of fun facts and a lot of tricky questions for the beginners out there. In the end, I'll summarize everything that we learned throughout this entire tutorial. And if you're a beginner, then you're in the right place because there's a lot of good things in the store.
So guys, I'm going to be talking about variables in a brief, but before that, I'm going to give you an example and you need to listen to that carefully. Alright, so guys, I'm going to be talking something about a container. Yes, you may have a lot of containers in your home. A container like a coffee mug, or a container like a water bottle, or it may be like a bucket. So guys, if you want to store something, you look for a container. If you want to store 1 liter of water, then you'll go for a water bottle. If you want to store 100 ml of coffee, then you'll go for a coffee cup. So is this the right container that you need to choose, isn't it? So if you come to my home and you'll ask for a coffee, I'm going to use a coffee mug. I'm going to serve you a coffee in a coffee mug, not in a water bottle. Yes, I can serve you coffee in a water bottle, but it's just not the right container. It's just not the right thing to serve you the coffee, isn't it? So like that, the variables are like containers. They contain something. While writing code, if you want to store something, then you can store it in a variable. Like you are storing water in a water bottle, like that you can store some value in a variable. So to make it simple, we can say the variables are like buckets. They are like containers. They store something. It may be a value, it may be a name, or it may be a number with decimal point, or anything that you want to store. So guys, choosing a right container is really important. So if you see the real world and if you see your day-to-day life, you can think easily that how you're choosing a right container. For example, if you want to store 100 ml of water, then you'll choose a smaller bottle to store it. And if you want to store 1 liter of water, then you'll choose a larger bottle to store it. And if you want to store 10 liters of water, then you'll go for a bucket to store it, isn't it? So the larger amount of thing that you want to store, you are using a larger container, isn't it? So like that, in Java, we have some different size of containers. And those containers are called data types.
Alright, so I guess now we have a little bit of fundamental on variables and data types, okay? So now let's go ahead and let's see the syntax of it, that how actually we can create a variable, right? So let's go ahead and let's look on the syntax. Alright, so to declare a variable, alright, so the first thing that we need is a data type, alright? And then we're gonna have a variable name, and we're gonna have an assignment operator, and we're gonna have the value, alright? So we're going to assign the value to the variable and we're going to choose the appropriate data type. So as I said, the data types defines what the type of the value that you want to store and what the size of the value that you want to store. Okay, So to simplify it, let's say you want to store a value 10, right? So if you want to store the value 10 in Java or any other programming language, the first thing that you need to figure out is what's the type of it, okay? And the next thing that you need to find is what's the size of it, right? As simple as that. So you're reading throughout your school that this 10 is a number, right? So what's type of it? The 10 is a number, okay? So let's write over here. So alright, so the next thing that we need to know is that what's the size of it, okay? So let's say to store numbers in Java, we have some different size of containers, okay? So let's have a look on that, alright? So the first thing that we have is known as byte, okay? So we can store numbers using byte. And the next one is short, okay? It's another data type that we have to store numbers, right? And the next one that we have is int. This is a pretty common one. And the last one that we have is known as long. Alright. So as of now, we understand to store numbers in Java, we have some different types of data types. They are byte, short, int, and long, right? But how to choose a right container, how to choose a right data type, isn't it? Because you said they all differ in size, but how to choose them? Well, I'm going to tell you the size of all these data types later in this tutorial. Right now, let's make it simple. Let's understand like this way. Byte is used to store a smaller number, and short is a little bigger than byte, and short can store a little more than byte, and int can actually store a little larger number in compared to these two, and the long actually can store a bigger number. It's funny, right? So this 10 is actually a very smaller number, so we can store it with all these containers, okay? So now let's say I'm going to take byte over here, okay? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to store this number 10 in a variable called ABC, and I'll use this container, I'll use this data type to store it, byte, okay? So the number I want to store is 10, isn't it? Okay, so I want to store this number 10 is a variable named ABC, okay? So write it over here, A, B, and C, all right? So I want to have an equal signs over here. So ABC equal 10, and I want to store this number with byte type, okay? So let's write over here, byte, okay? So we can say byte ABC equal to 10. This is how it looks, isn't it? And the last thing that you need to do, you must have known it, you need to write the semicolon over here. So congratulations, you have declared successfully a variable in Java. Alright, so we have written ABC, okay? So we can write over here anything. We can write Bob, we can write Frank, you can write X, you can like a character, you can write a string, or anything that you want, okay? Don't be confused about the name, alright? You can take any name. Alright, so now let's switch back to over here. Okay, so now all this data type that we have discussed, byte, short, int, and long, has one thing in common. They store number. They are used to store numbers, okay? But they all differ in size, okay? They have some different size, okay? The text, they occupies different memory space, okay? So now let's go ahead and let's learn about how much memory they take, right? So the byte takes 1 byte of memory, okay? So if you want to store something using the byte data type, it's going to take 1 byte of memory. As you know, 1 byte equal to 8 bits. Okay, so if you want to store something using byte, it's going to take 8 bits or 1 byte of memory, alright? So now let's quickly see how much other data types takes memory space. The short takes 2 bytes of memory, and 2 bytes is equal to 16 bits. And if you talk about int, it's going to take 4 byte of memory space, and if you convert it to bit, it's going to be around 32 bits, okay? Okay, but how about long? So the long takes 8 bytes of memory, which is 64 bits, okay? As simple as that if you convert it, alright? Okay, so as of now we have learned that how to declare a variable using a appropriate data type, and we also covered that how much memory space that one data type takes, right? So now we're gonna have a deeper dive and we're gonna create some more variables and we're gonna learn some fun facts. Okay, so let's discover more about it. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. Okay, so now let's get our hands dirty by declaring some more variables. How about this? Byte b equal to 18, or we can declare something like byte x equal to 22, or we can declare something like byte number equal to 100. So everything is fine, right? But how about this? Byte c equal to 128. Is it a valid code, or we do have any problem in it? So if you write a byte c equal to 128 and if you try to compile it, I'm sorry, you are going to get a compilation error. So what's the reason for it? So to make you understand this, I'm going to take an example of a coffee pot. Well, let's say if this coffee pot has a capacity range that it can only store 100 ml of water or 100 ml of coffee, but if you're pouring more than 100 ml of coffee, it's gonna overflow, isn't it? So just like that, all your data types has a specific range, okay? And if you're exceeding that range and if you're exceeding the maximum capacity of your data type and if you want to store something, then you're gonna get compilation error. Okay, so now let's quickly bring up all the data types that we discussed few minutes back, right? So we have discussed about byte, short, int, and long, right? And each of these data type has a specific memory space, isn't it? So these are called size. Okay, so now let's try discussing the range of the different data types, all right? And let's start this from byte. Well, the range of the byte is minus 128 to 127, okay? So if you are storing more than 127 within a byte, then you are going to get compilation error. Well, if you check out this example, we're storing 128 in a byte, which is exceeding the range of the byte, which is minus 128 to 127. So we can store numbers in between this, but if we are trying to exceed this particular number, we are going to get compilation error. I hope this is clear, right? So it's really very important to understand about the range of a data type, all right? Okay, we cannot represent the number 128 with byte, but we can represent it by using short or int. For example, we can write short b equal to 128. It is absolutely fine because the range of the short allows 128 to store within it. Okay, so now can you tell me, can you represent this using int? Yes, absolutely. We can tell int b equal to 128. There is no problem in it because the range of int can store the number 128. Okay, so now you must be wondering, alright, but how can I figure out the range of short and int and long? Okay, so here you have a look. Well, the range of the short is minus 32,768 to 32,767. Okay, so this is the range of short. So short can store a value within this range. Okay, so as simple as that. So what about int? So now you are just watching the range of int. I really can't read that. It's such a bigger number. Okay, and even the long range is even more than the range of int. As I said, long can store a bigger number. Okay, and now you're watching the range of long. Okay, I really can't read that. It's such a big number. Okay, there you go. That's a complete value of the range of long. Well, now the most important question, the question maybe you're thinking of, that well, Do I need to remember all these stupid values? Well, of course not. Even I really don't know that. I only know the range of a byte or short, and all these values of int and long I just copy and paste it from Google. Okay, so in order to code, you really don't need to remember them. Okay, as you go ahead and you start coding, you'll get to know about it slowly and steadily, that how to use all these data types. All right, you don't need to worry much. Okay, so as of now we have discussed a lot that how to store numbers. Okay, so if you talk about numbers, then we have already discussed how to store these kind of numbers like 2 or 200 or 2000 or 2700, isn't it? And we also have discussed that to store this number, we have some different data types like byte, short, int and long. But guys, if you look closely, then you can find that these numbers are not coming with a decimal point. So these are the numbers without having any decimal point. But what about if I want to store a number with a decimal point? A number like 10.12 or 100.87634 or 200.34 or something like that. Okay, so if you look closely, then you can find these numbers having a decimal point. And guys, to store a number with a decimal point in Java, we have two different data types. First one is float, and the next one is double. So guys, like the other data type, this float and double has some different size and some different range. So to make it simple, we can say this float takes 4 bytes of memory, which is exactly 32-bit. Okay, and the double takes 8 bytes of memory, or you can say it's actually 64 bits. All right. So to summarize it, we can say to store numbers with a decimal point, we have to store it either in float or in double. All right. So guys, now let's declare a variable using float data type. All right. So we can write something float f equal to 10.11111 up to 9 times. All right. And we can declare a double variable like this, double d equal to 10.111 up to 9 times. So you can see over here, I'm taking the same value and trying to store it with float and the same value with the double, isn't it? So guys, is it valid? So make sure that the double d equal to 10.9 times 1 is absolutely valid. But what about this? Well, if you talk about this value 10.9 times 1 and if you're trying to store it within a float, then actually there is no problem in it. But JVM has some problem with it. All right, so this thing is never gonna be valid. This is going to give you a compilation error. All right, now you're gonna ask me why. What's the reason for it? Well, the reason is really simple. Okay, so now let's learn the fun facts behind it. Well, if you want to store some values, if you want to store some numbers with decimal point like 10.12 or 10.11 or 10.9 times 1 or whatever, if JVM finds if you're storing a number with some decimal point, then by default JVM gonna store it within a double. Okay, so by default the JVM gonna take the data type as double. But if you look over here closely, we are storing a number with a decimal point and we are actually storing it within a float. So JVM find it, this value is a double value, but you are storing it in a float, that's why it's giving you error. So if you want to store a number with decimal point within a float, you need to specify that to JVM. You need to tell JVM that, hey JVM, I want to store a value like a decimal point value and I want to store that within a float. All right, so to specify that to JVM, you actually need to put a f over here in the end of this value. Now look at the following code. Float f equal to 10.111 up to 9 times with the ending with a f. So this code is absolutely valid because you're specifying JVM that you want to store a float value and you are storing it within a float type. Alright, so this piece of code is absolutely valid. Well, there is actually another very interesting thing that you need to know about float and double. Alright, and you can differentiate both this float and double like this. Alright, so actually right now if I want to print this particular value, if I want to print this value to my output console, then how can I do this? I can do this in Java by writing this statement system.out.println, and I want to put this variable f inside the parenthesis. Well, if you do not understand system.out.println, what does it mean and how it works, then you just remember right now that the system.out.println is used to print something in the output console. You don't need to worry what is system, what is out, what is println. We'll be talk about it very briefly in my letter or in my comment session. Okay, so right now let's only focus about how a variable works. Okay, so the point over here is if I want to print this f within a print statement, what is going to be happen? Well, if you want to print the f over here, the output is going to look something like this: 10.11111 and 11111. So this is actually 6 times 1, but here we are actually putting 9 ones after the decimal point, isn't it? All right, interesting, right? All right, so how about this? If you want to print the double value, all right, system.out.println, and if you want to print this t, what is going to be happen? So as the output, you are going to find this value, 10 point and 9 times 1. So what is the conclusion? Well, if you look it closely, then you can find here you want to store up to decimal point 9 digits to a double value, and here you want to do the same thing, 9 digits after the decimal point, and you want to store it within a float type. All right, so the point is if you want to store more than 6 digits in a float type, then you are not going to get it in the output. So for float, you maximum can store up to 6 digits after the decimal point. It's as simple as that, right? And if you're going to put more values after that, you're going to lose it in your output. All right, but how about double? You are getting all your 9 digits over here just because double can store up to 15 digits after the decimal point. All right, the float can store 6 digits after the decimal point, and the double can store up to 15 digits after the decimal point. All right. Okay, so now let's talk about another confusing thing for the beginners. So guys, if I can write double d equal to 7, is it valid? So well, I'm trying to store a value 7, which is an integer value, to a double type. Well, we know that double is used to store numbers with decimal point, and we're actually storing an integer value to a double type, that's d. So is it valid? Well, you need to keep in mind that you can do this. All right, you can store an integer value to a double data type. There is no problem in it. But if you're going to print d, you are going to get 7.0 as output, not 7. The reason why you'll get 7.0 because whatever the number that you are storing with double, it's going to convert it as decimal. All right, so you're putting 7, but it's going to return to you like 7.0. Right, this is one more very important thing to understand. Well, as of now we have covered 6 different data types in Java. Right, now 2 more to go, and I'm really gonna take very less time to explain that. Okay, so we have another data type in Java called char, and the last data type that we need to discuss about is called something Boolean. All right, so this char is used to represent characters in Java, alright? And this Boolean is used to represent check conditions. Alright, now let's get back to this char data type, right? So when do we are going to use this? Alright, so if you need to represent a character like A, or if you need to represent a character like Z, or any of the characters in the uppercase alphabet or in the lowercase alphabet, then you need to present it using this char data type, right? So now let's say if I need to store this value A in Java, then I need to store like this, like char value equal to A. And if I need to store Z in Java, then I need to do like this. I need to write like char another value equal to Z. Well, right now if you observe this piece of code, you can find a syntax error in it, and a lot of beginners are confused about it, right? And they really make a very common error, and the error is they forget to put these values inside inverted comma, right? So you need to make sure that you are putting this character in between a inverted comma like this. Alright, so now let's talk a little bit about Boolean also, right? So in Java, if you need to store some conditions like true or false, then you need to take help of Boolean, alright? So how can you store this value true in Java? You can write something like this: Boolean condition equal to true, or Boolean b equal to false, right? As simple as that, okay? So this is how we're going to represent characters and Booleans in Java, alright? Well, that's all about it, but I really want to cover one more nitty-gritty things for you guys. So let's say in a print statement, if I add two characters like A plus A, what is going to be the result? So can you guess it? Is it going to be something like AA? And if you really guessing this value AA will be the output, then you're absolutely wrong, because the right output is gonna be 130. Well, right now you must be wondering, what the heck is this? How the addition of A and A will be 130? Well, that's the right question. Guys, I'm damn sure that if you are a computer science student or if you're an engineering student, you must have known something about Ascii values. And if you talk about Ascii, this A, the capital A, starts from 65. So the caps A value in Ascii will be 65. And just like that, the caps B will be 66, followed by C as 67 or something. Alright, so the value of 65 plus 65 will be 130, isn't it? So 130 will be the right answer. Well, before we wrap up this char and Boolean, I want to tell you about the size of char and Boolean. Alright, so the size of char is exactly 2 bytes, alright, which is 16 bits. And if you talk about Boolean, a lot of people say Boolean takes 1 byte of memory or 1 bit of memory, but that is not correct, okay? So if you talk about Boolean, there is no predefined size for Boolean, or there is no documentation of Java which defines the size of the Boolean. So if somebody asks you about the size of Boolean, you can say that's not defined. So guys, to summarize everything, so today we learned about data types in Java. So there are actually 2 types of data types in Java. The first one is primitive type, and the second one is a reference type. So today whatever we learned is coming under primitive type. For an example, we cover about byte, short, int, long, double, float, and Boolean. So all these data types are coming under primitive type. So you must be wondering, what about the reference type? Well, I didn't cover it in this tutorial. We'll have separate tutorial for that. But just for your reference, I can say some examples of reference type, like all of your Java classes, arrays are reference type, okay? Your Java classes like string will be a good example of reference type. Talking about more about reference type in my coming tutorial. Well, before I wrap up, I need to say one more thing, that I forget to add char type inside primitive data type, okay? Don't forget to add char inside primitive type, alright? So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. And if you do like this tutorial, then subscribe to my channel for more updates and like us on Facebook for regular updates on Java. That's it. Thank you very much and happy coding.